Thanks for joining us on this edition of National Focus. I'm Nisha Charles. Coming up, the Ministry of Education to enforce the practices of child-friendly schools. We take a look at Dominica's traditional carnival costumes, and the St. Joseph Constituency will soon have a new library. Stay tuned for details of these and other stories after this.
If you can believe this,
come by my house and let me show you some movies.
why can't you believe this? Some mothers don't believe their own children when they say they've been sexually abused, and they don't report it. Remember, if anyone asks to see or touch their private parts, touches them inappropriately, shows them or forces them to touch one's private parts, has sex with them, shows them pornographic material, or deliberately lets them hear or see the act of sex, then it is sexual abuse. Believe your child and report the sexual abuse. For more information about child abuse, contact these agencies. This message brought to you by UNICEF and this station.
Thanks for staying with us. The Ministry of Education is continuing to put measures in place to ensure that the practices of child-friendly schools are implemented. Child-friendly schools are those that have adopted the Child-Friendly School Initiative, which seeks to ensure that schools are safer, healthier, and a more positive place for children. While speaking at the launch of a pilot program to introduce a child assault prevention program on Wednesday, Acting Chief Education Officer Melina Fontaine says there have been positive changes in the schools that have already adopted the initiative.
Our understanding of violence is that it is not a human condition. We are not born to commit acts of violence, but that it is one that is learned and preventable. We must understand, however, that prevention requires a reassessment of how conflict is viewed and resolved. And I think that is the conversation that we should be having so that we can draw closer to understanding that certain actions are just not acceptable and should not be covered under the word culture or tradition.
The Child Assault Program, which has funding support from the Canada Fund for Local Initiatives, seeks to empower teachers, parents, and children to avoid, prevent, and resolve conflict or assault by peers or adults.
The Ministry of Education and Human Resource Development is very appreciative of the efforts of Child Fund Caribbean in bringing this project to Dominica, and is honored to be partnering with them, UNICEF, and the Canadian Fund for Local Initiatives to pilot this project, which seeks to support children's freedom from all forms of violence, including bullying and assault from their peers or adults within the learning environment. We thank you for your efforts, because in reality, it takes all stakeholders coming together to get rid of the scourge of violence in our society. We must provide our children with the knowledge to know when they are being violated and what they can do about it.
A study conducted by UNICEF in 2005 on the assault of children in Dominica recommended that more focus be placed on prevention and intervention, as well as examining the legislative laws.
The Child Assault Prevention Program being launched this morning is a step in the right direction. We will first pilot it in 2 schools and will be monitoring very closely the implementation process to help us determine the changes that will be directly attributable to the project activities. Based on what we have heard about the program, we expect to see, for example, more children and adults displaying their knowledge of self-protection and prevention strategies, as well as an increase in self-confidence among children to enable them to self-protect and report all forms of bullying, abuse, and assaults by children as well as adults.
The pilot program will be implemented at the Roseau Primary and Goodwill Primary schools. After successful implementation, it is intended to be rolled out in all primary schools.
Our schools are more and more embracing school-wide positive behavior support as a whole school approach to manage behavior. This assault prevention program will help us to build more responsive environments that favor appropriate student behavior.
The Dominica State Prison has implemented yet another program aimed at improving the lives of its inmates. On Wednesday, GIS News took a tour of the first phase of what is to become a carpentry workshop, funded by an $88,000 grant from the Canada Fund for Local Initiatives. Prison Officer Wilbur Daniel is coordinator of this workshop.
The purpose of the project of the carpentry workshop is to have, it's part of our rehabilitation approach to running the prison, and several modules of carpentry are going to be run at the prison for at least 25 inmates over the next 5 months. The funding that has been provided to us will cover the refurbishing of the workshop, re-roofing the sides, the floors, as well as preparation of modules to run the training, and purchasing of equipment and tools for the workshop.
Daniel says that by the end of the workshop, the participants will leave better equipped for the lives outside the prison walls.
When the trainees have completed their training, they're all going to receive a toolkit, which should include quite a number of pieces of tools that would be like a stepping stone for them when they step out of the prison gates to begin to try and find employment for themselves or create employment for themselves, but as well as they'll have equipment to do just that.
After 4 weeks of fierce competition, a champion has finally emerged. Wednesday night was one that was anticipated by many, as 20 finalists competed for the title of Stardom King of the Tent 2015. However, after all competitors sang their last songs, there could only be one winner. The winner, who took away $5,000 prizes and the 2015 Stardom Tent crown, was 19-year-old Sheldon D. Professor Alfred, the youngest Stardom King to date.
The 2015 Stardom Monarch is the Professor! He receives his trophy from Miss Dominica and the crown. After this, he gets a check. The crown is placed on his head. Professor, please stand to receive your check from Big Edge. Miss Dominica will assist us also with that. Mrs. Doctorow from Big Edge will step forward. He also gets a bag from Big Edge. And Miss Dominica will present a check to the professor.
Derek Lugas St. Ville took away the first runner-up trophy.
First runner-up in the 2015 Stardom Calypso Monarch is first runner-up in the Stardom Monarch of 2015 is Lugas! Let Lugas have his moment.
In third place was Gregory Caressa Riviere.
Second runner-up. The judges have decided that this gentleman is Caressa! Third place, second runner-up.
And sharing the fourth place trophy were Chris B. Sylvester and Jude J.D. Deloney.
Fourth place, we had a tie that they did not and could not break. Two Calypsonians came out fourth tonight. Crispy and J.D., fourth place. Step forward, Crispy, and receive. Third runner-up, fourth place. You share this honor with JD.
Here are some highlights from the event.
Everyone could find a place. If you fall through frustration, Calypso still will give you a chance, cause the country nice, boy. The country nice. I do mother, mama, man in World Cup. I say, the man in World Cup. Never saw a people. They fall on the ground. And you will see how they rock each other, but
homie, gotta come to roll the dice. Trouble, trouble. I want to roll the dice. Let me see hands up again. Everybody, I want to be in Uganda. People in position, not with an addiction. Calypso shackles coming your direction. Nothing about murderers, don't take that molesters. Let me introduce you to our Calypso great leaders. That is why we have to say sorry. We did not know. Sorry, we hurt your ego. Now we are down on our knees. We begging you please. Why are you?
look me, the bad man in town. They can't get me down.
Dominica joined the People's Republic of China on Wednesday to celebrate the Chinese New Year 2015. The ambassador of the People's Republic of China to Dominica, His Excellency Li Jiaoning, in celebration of the New Year, hosted a reception at his residence. His Excellency President Charles Savre and Mrs. Savre, the Honorable Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit and Mrs. Skerrit, the Honorable Speaker of the House of Assembly Alex Boyd Knights, former Presidents Liverpool and Williams, and ministers of government were among those joining in the celebration. In his remarks, His Excellency Li Jiaoning expressed gratitude to those who joined in the festivity of the New Year. The ambassador took the opportunity to tout his country's gains in the last year.
As the second largest economy, the largest trading nation in exports and in good trade, China's economy continues to grow steadily at a rate of 7.4%, still the fastest in the world, while at the same time achieving positive changes in the modality of growth, improvements in economic structure, and shifts in the engine of growth from investment to final consumption. This indicates that despite the weak international demand and other negative factors, China's economic growth trajectory has settled into a new norm, characterized by reasonably high growth rates, more efficient value creation, and higher sustainability of long-term development. China's GDP in aggregate terms for the first time broke through the $10 trillion level.
The ambassador also expressed gratitude for Dominica's continued support as China strives to further strengthen relations with Latin America and the Caribbean. His Excellency described as heartwarming words of support expressed by Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit regarding terrorist attacks suffered by China in 2014. The ambassador's hope is that the relations between Dominica and the PRC can be further strengthened over the next decade and beyond.
Although our two countries are far apart geographically, we are very close in our hearts and our minds. Although our two countries are very different in our respective histories, cultures, and national conditions, we respect each other, are open and willing to learn from each other's stories, as well as to pursue development of our friendship and cooperation in all areas that bring tangible benefits to our two peoples. As an old Chinese saying goes, a bosom friend afar brings a distant land near. I believe that China-Dominica relations will continue to develop and expand and deepen in the coming decade.
The Chinese New Year or Spring Festival marks the start of the New Year on the Chinese lunar calendar. It begins on the second new moon after the winter solstice and ends on the full moon 15 days later. The Chinese New Year is traditionally celebrated by visits to family and friends, special meals, fireworks, and gift-giving. This year, New Year's Day is on February 19th, and 2015 is the year of the goat. The Eden and Emilia Baptist Memorial Foundation is once again giving back to its community of St. Joseph. This time around, the New Jersey-based foundation will reconstruct a library, resource center, and Catholic parish hall in the community. The foundation held a groundbreaking ceremony at the site on Thursday. The foundation, which was started about 2 decades ago, was formed by a group of 10 siblings, children of Eden and Emilia, who mostly live in the United States. Angelique Baptiste is president of the foundation.
We recognize the unique role that the Library and Resource Center play in St. Joseph education and empowerment of the youth. The project that we are celebrating today is requiring leadership, foresight, careful planning, ownership, and lots of help in assisting with funds for a speedy completion of this library and resource center.
The property was donated by the Catholic Church, which is a partner in making this venture a reality. Father Vanti Auguste, parish priest, expressed his belief that the church needs to take care of its own.
I am very happy to say that the Memorial Foundation is willing to undertake a project for our people here in this parish, more specifically for the young people, those who are young, the school children, because the church has a duty to look after its own. And therefore, this library that will be built here, and of course the parish center, will add much to our young people, and not only to the young people, but the parish hall, for example, will be used for church purposes, meetings, catechetical purposes, and also for the elderly.
The plan is to merge these two buildings, that is the old St. Joseph Library and the old Church Parish Hall, to form one ground floor. The ground floor will be transformed into a parish hall, and a newly constructed top floor will serve as the library and resource center. The Honorable Member of Parliament for the St. Joseph Constituency, Kelva Daru, sees this as an opportunity to raise the level of literacy in his community of St. Joseph. He pledged his full support and that of the government of Dominica.
As a Member of Parliament, we will ensure that we provide the foundation with a lot of support in terms of materials for the construction of the buildings, and whatever other support that they may need on the way forward, the government will come on board and will provide that support. We will also provide support in terms of ensuring that when the building is completed, that the required equipment for the library as well as the resource center will be put in place.
Honorable Daru also made this promise, which was well received.
I can assure you, Angie, that when the library is completed, the Ministry of Information Technology will ensure that it will be a Wi-Fi zone to allow the students, the young people, and the residents of St. Joseph to be able to access the internet whenever possible.
Honorable Daru urged residents to be appreciative by taking care of the building when it is complete. He also urged all in the community to take full advantage of the facility when its doors will be opened. The Eden and Emilia Foundation is on island yearly to donate to different sectors, including health and education. The Honorable Minister estimates that over the years, the foundation has contributed millions of dollars to the people of Dominica. It is often said that Dominica has the real carnival, the real mass in the Caribbean. The nation boasts itself as one of the last remaining to exhibit traditional costumes during the carnival celebrations. Kimani Seja now takes us into a look at Dominica's traditional carnival costumes.
GIS took a look into the traditional costumes of Dominica's real mass. We wanted to find out the origin of these costumes and what influences revelers to dress like they do. Undeniably, over the years, Dominica's carnival has evolved. The sounds of hi-fi and live bands have replaced the steel pan and lapo cabuit for the most part, and the glamorous costumes have replaced the traditional papi show wedding, suswell sui, and sensei. But the true spirit of the art form still remains. We had a chat with Alwyn Bully, who forms part of the Dominica Festivals Committee and one who has delved into the traditions of carnival in the Caribbean. Bully begins by describing how most of Dominica's traditional costumes were handed down by the country's African ancestors.
We refer to costumes such as sensei and darkies and so forth as African retentions, things that we have retained from African history. As you know, the Atlantic slave trade, our ancestors, enslaved African people, brought many traditions with them, customs which were very basic to their existence. And in some cases, these customs were lost and forgotten. In other cases, they were revived. So in the case of the sensei, what seems to have happened is that at the time of celebration, like in some islands, maybe Christmas time, in other islands it was just before the Lenten season, depending on who was the slave master. In the British Islands, where the Anglican Church was more prominent, like you had Christmas time, or the Feast of the Three Kings, that happens in some cases. In the places where the French were more prevalent, the Catholic Church had a very strong adherence to observing the Lenten period. And that period, the 2 days before Lent, were considered 2 days of saying farewell to the flesh, or things of the flesh. So when the slaves were told, well, you can become anything you want to be for 1 or 2 days, they thought in terms of costumes. They went back to their ancestral costumes. And these ancestral costumes had to do with various rituals, African rituals.
These costumes originated mostly from West Africa, from countries such as Senegal, Nigeria, and the Ivory Coast. Bully explained that even today, identical costumes are still being used in tribal customs. The sensei, which is one of Dominica's most popular traditional carnival costume, was used by the Maroons or runaway slaves to disguise themselves in the forests.
One of the traits of the Maroons, which was very successful in their survival, was the art of camouflage. They were able to take trees and branches of trees, put them over their bodies and disguise themselves and become part of the forest. I think that has also influenced the way that we use these sensei costumes, especially the pie fig, the rope, which is sisal really, a plant cipher of a plant, drying off the plant and getting the strings of it, and creating the sensei costumes that way.
He describes another interesting tradition, the darkies and redoka.
In the case of the darkies, it was a mixture of molasses with charcoal and other forms of coloring. In the redoka, I think that was tied into the Amerindian customs. The Kalinago people, as you know, painted themselves in red, something called ruku, and it's similar to what they used. So I think that was one of the connections with the Amerindian people.
He described how Maroons often interacted with Kalinago people who offered them support and protection in the forests. Bully says, unlike what was taught at school, there was no antagonism between blacks and Kalinagos. The Papisha wedding is another old tradition, but not as old as sensei and other costumes.
Basically, the Papisha wedding was lampooning or criticizing or making fun of the master, because all through the year they would be sort of subjected to the master. And when they got a chance to make fun of the master, they did it. So in the carnival, there's like freedom, basically, I guess to a certain extent, to do that. So what they were doing was imitating the master when he was having his parties, his ladies and so forth. So the men would dress up like the women would dress like the men, or both the men and women would dress in very elaborate kind of ways of kind of criticizing, but without saying that, and say how stupid it looked. So they had feathers in their hair and flowers in their hair and big dresses and big backsides and big breasts and so forth.
Simply put, the Papisha wedding was meant to ridicule the slave masters. This tradition still exists in most Caribbean countries today. The bois bois is an African tradition which was lost. Bully explained how, as Director of Culture, he helped bring back this tradition to Dominica.
One of the earliest things we did was we invited some bois bois stilt walkers from the island of St. John in U.S. Virgin Islands, because they've kept that tradition alive very, very strongly in St. John. And the first person we brought down was a guy called David Robertson, and he came by himself, and it was fascinating to see him on those tall sticks. And he enjoyed Dominica a lot. He stayed on and he taught 1 or 2 people. The following year, he came back with about 5 or 6 other Babas from St. John. And for about 3 years, he came back with groups. And as he came, he began teaching the art of stilt walking to people in Dominica.
There are still some other traditional costumes which were lost over the years. For example, the Red Indian, which still exists in St. Kitts and Nevis and Montserrat, but unfortunately was not able to survive in Dominica.
Luckily, the Ban Mauvais in Coliho has survived quite well too, which is another African retention. This one, I'm not too sure of the origins because it has a particular shape of the headpiece, and I haven't been able to trace that. Same with the headpiece that's being used by the Kalinago people now.
And then there is the Suswel Sui and Fouet.
Suswel Sui is more a variation of a bat costume. And it seems, again, up and down the Caribbean, you find bat costumes with a cape, and usually in bright colors like satins, and sometimes would have mirrors, round mirrors attached to them, and usually a hat with a fringe, a long fringe over it. So that one seems to have more of a European connection rather than an African connection. And the fouet, which is in itself very mysterious, it's the guys who are dressed all in black and they have these long whips, lashing it on the ground, a lot of force, which is an art by itself to hit it on the ground and make that sound, that loud noise. I think it has to do with the portrayal of connection with slavery. It could be a representation of the fact that whips were used on the slaves, and now it is in the hands of the slaves.
GIS will bring you more from this interesting look at traditional carnival costumes in Friday's newscast. Kimani Sejan for GIS News.
Thanks, Kimani. And that's the English news. McPherson St. Luce is next with the Creole highlights.
Allô tout le monde, bienvenue à cette nouvelle en créole. Non moi c'est McPherson St. Luce. Premièrement, le gouvernement Dominique a un commitment industrie fig sustainable au ligne de maladie black sigatoka. Il faut cela, ministre agriculture qui travaille et puis organisation Fair Trade si l'on a fait ou la produit yo rejeté à la place l'Angleterre. Monsieur Ran Ansem, c'est officier quarantine ministre agriculture.
So encore nous avons des moun black sigatoka là. Commitment gouvernement c'est pour sustain industrie. Yo jaka travaille avec Fair Trade. Quand t'es Fair Trade t'es suspended pour vous et fig en UK. Et pas Fair Trade mais des trois planter Fair Trade t'es suspend yo et yo parler ça vous et fig. Gouvernement Dominique ministre agriculture mettait un programme pour end Fair Trade pour avec ministre agriculture extension qui travaille avec Fair Trade pour garder comment nous garder bitin quality parce que quality fig là pas seulement black cigatoka ou pas en anglais ou dire ça scruffiness avec quality pas bon. So nous pour travailler avec Fair Trade c'est un pays pour nous garder comment nous ka ender pour continuer export en UK.
En autre nouvelle, ça fait que maltraiter les enfants pas bon pour le développement ailleurs. Parole celle-là sorti votre officier Child Fund Caribbean, Gilena Fontaine, pendant un workshop qui a mis attention à ces welfare des enfants.
Mon gars, depuis combien d'années, nous tous accoutumés des enfants, bas des enfants, qui ça. Mais toutes ces modern research là, ça va travailler bien bâti monde. Vous savez, so on peut try something plus positive, plus hard love. Pour ces gens, ils can grow up plus positif pour faire quelque chose de bon pour Dominique, vous savez, pour famille et puis mari et madame les enfants. So si nous voulons ça, nous pour atteindre quelque chose de différent, de différente manière.
Fontaine fait parole que les enfants n'y doivent.
Si vous ne savez pas qui est la terre, ça ou la café, ça ou c'est un valuable monde, c'est un human being sur la planète là. Ou pas que savent comment pour approach monde, comment pour défendre corps, ou savent, so c'est les gens petits quand ils sont petits, ils sont intelligents, ils ne peuvent savoir toutes ces bagailles ça là. So ils sont protect quand les pièces adultes pas là pour protection. Ça, mais première, nous ces adultes là nous pour protéger ces gens là.
En autre nouvelle, Dominique bien avancé pour complètement échouer Record Hard Registering qu'a servi technologie IT. selon registrar Ozzy Walsh, projet ça là qui commencé l'année passée, c'est yon qui plusieurs pays Kawaii Paning. Walsh aussi fait parole que projet ça là qui a marché en phase, que tout de suite fini, ça c'est système là entier qui est computerized. Gouvernement Dominique tapé assistance canadienne, banque note et puis projet là. Quand même, Mouché Walsh aussi bien plaisir que le public là kawan si pour projet là. Projet ça l'a coûté gouvernement Dominique 1,8 million de dollars. Et puis finalement, bouillon fest qui est formé par Mass Dominique l'année là. Spectacle ça là qui prend place en Stadium Windsor Park en Roseau, qui voit plusieurs orchestres bouillon assistage en parmi Triple K Global.
Nous avons joué à Bouillon Fest on Friday, Kevin, à Windsor Park Sports Stadium. Moi, j'ai encouragé tout le monde à venir, plaisir danser, rouler, venir amuser à bon musique bouillon. Je suis expecté un bon show parce que Triple K c'est un orchestre qui a joué toute quelque musique, mais bouillon c'est pour moi, musique Triple K avec je suis expecté un bon show, man.
Messieurs, mesdames, ça c'est tout pour nouvelles en créole pour à présent. Non, moi c'est McPherson St. Luce. Au revoir.
Coming up next, why secondhand smoke is bad for you.
Dominica is blessed with an abundance of water, but getting it to your home is an expensive venture. You have a responsibility to conserve water, to use it wisely. Remember the old adage, you never miss the water till the well runs dry. Think water, think life.
Being around tobacco smoke is bad for you, even if it's someone else's smoke. When someone smokes a cigarette, most of the smoke doesn't go into their lungs. It goes into the air where anyone nearby can breathe it. Kids are particularly at risk for the effects of secondhand smoke because their bodies are still growing and they breathe at a faster rate than adults. Conditions such as sudden infant death syndrome, bronchitis, ear infections, and chronic cough have been linked to the exposure of secondhand smoke in children. And that's all for this edition of National Focus. We always welcome your suggestions and comments. Drop us an email at gis@dominica.gov.dm or visit our website news.gov.dm. Like our Facebook page, facebook.com/GISNewsDominica, and follow our Twitter at GIS Dominica. You can also catch up on past National Focus newscasts on our GIS Dominica YouTube channel. From all of us here on the GIS News Desk, I'm Nisha Charles. Thanks for watching.